The Star Alliance had long basked in the glow of peace and prosperity, a network of alien species bound by common interests and mutual cooperation. They shared technology, culture, and history, but what they did not share was the memory of humanity, a once mighty civilization whose warships had once ruled the stars. After the great diaspora, humanity faded into myth, their technologies lost to time, or so it was believed. Captain Jackson Rivers stood on the observation deck of the Imperium, staring out into the cold expanse of space. The stars glittered like diamonds on black velvet. But something was different today. The usual calm of the cosmos had been disrupted. A faint signal had appeared on the Alliance's deep space sensors, a strange, distorted transmission that seemed almost ancient in origin. At first, it was dismissed as interference, maybe an anomaly or a glitch in the system, but the frequency persisted, faint but undeniable, and when it was analyzed, it was clear to the Alliance that this was no mistake. The signal was human in origin. Rivers paced the deck, his mind racing. The thought of humanity's return had always been a far-off dream, something told in hushed whispers among the oldest of the species in the Alliance. No one truly believed it would happen, but now the signal was real, and Rivers had been called to lead the investigation. He turned to Dr. Aiden Marks, a sharp-eyed historian with a passion for the ancient past. "Aiden, what do you make of this?" Rivers asked, his voice heavy with the weight of what this discovery might mean. Dr. Marks adjusted his glasses, looking over the data displayed on the holographic screen. "This signal is definitely human in nature, no mistake about that," he replied, his voice tinged with disbelief. "But its origin is unclear. This could be a relic of something long lost or a call for help from the past." The thought of a human warship or a fleet surviving in isolation for centuries sent a chill through Rivers. He had studied human history well, but never thought he would live to see it re-emerge. Still, there was no time to waste. He knew the Alliance would expect answers, and they would expect him to find them. Orders came swiftly from the Star Alliance High Command. Rivers was to assemble a team and travel to the source of the signal, an uncharted region of the outer rim on the edge of known space. The coordinates were vague and uncertain, but the journey had to begin now. Rivers gathered his crew on board the Imperium, a sleek battle cruiser equipped for deep space expeditions. Along with Dr. Marks, he brought Zorath, an alien engineer and rogue inventor who had once been exiled from the Alliance for his eccentric views on ancient human technology. Zorath had a particular interest in human warships of old, and his expertise could prove invaluable. As they crossed the vast emptiness toward the signal source, Rivers felt the gravity of the situation press down on him. The mission was already dangerous, but if humanity truly had returned, it would change everything. Every power balance, every alliance, and every rival in the galaxy would feel its impact. The journey was long and perilous as they passed through uncharted nebulae and asteroid fields. The crew kept a tense watch on their instruments, hoping to find some sign of the warship, but as they neared the coordinates, the silence of space seemed only to deepen. Then they saw it, a massive silhouette drifting in the darkness, a ship unlike anything they had ever seen. It was colossal, ancient-looking, but its design was unmistakably human. The Valorous, a name that had not been spoken in millennia, but one that had lived on in legends. It was a human warship, an artifact from a forgotten age, and it had been waiting for them. The Valorous loomed in the darkness, its massive hull scarred by time, yet still remarkably intact. The ship's surface was pockmarked, weathered by centuries of space dust and cosmic radiation, but its sheer scale was enough to send a tremor of awe through Captain Rivers. It was a relic of the past, a ghost of a time when humanity had once been the undisputed rulers of the stars. Rivers stood at the command console of the Imperium, his eyes fixed on the screen displaying the warship's outline. His thoughts raced, but his mind remained sharp. "Zorath, run a full scan of the ship's systems. I want to know what we're dealing with," he ordered, his voice steady, though a bead of sweat traced down the side of his face. Zorath, his hands flying over the interface with practiced ease, nodded. "It's incredible, Captain," he muttered, as if in awe. "The energy signatures are unlike anything I've ever encountered. The ship's systems are still functioning, but they're dormant. It's been waiting for something, or someone." Dr. Marks, ever the historian, leaned over Zoreth's shoulder, his expression one of disbelief. This can't be real. The Valorous was supposed to have been lost during the final stages of the human exodus, before they disappeared from the galaxy. But if it's here, then the legends are true. Captain Rivers turned sharply. We don't have time for legends. We need to figure out how to get inside. With a quiet hum, Zoreth's fingers danced over the console, activating the ship's ancient security protocols. The Valorous had been abandoned long ago, but it seemed that the ship's artificial intelligence, dormant until now, had been awaiting their arrival. A low, eerie voice crackled over the comms, smooth but metallic. Authorization detected. Welcome, humans. The ship had recognized them, not just as explorers, but as descendants of the species it had once served. Rivers could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. This is Captain Jackson Rivers of the Imperium. We've come to investigate the source of the signal. We mean no harm. The AI, now identified as Aegis, paused before responding. Your presence is acknowledged, Captain Rivers. Welcome aboard. Your ancestors left a legacy, a promise. It is time for humanity to return. A chill ran down Rivers' spine. Aegis knew them, but how much did it know? And what had it been waiting for? With a deep breath, Rivers nodded to Zoreth, who had already activated the docking clamps. Prepare to board the Valorous. Let's see what's inside. The airlock hissed open and Rivers, Dr. Marks, and Zoreth made their way into the warship. The inside was dark, eerily quiet, but there was an undeniable feeling of age and grandeur. It felt like stepping into a tomb, yet one filled with untapped potential. The walls were lined with ancient control panels, each one untouched by time. The air smelled faintly of metal and ozone, as if the ship had been preserved in some kind of stasis. Aegis, show us the way, Rivers called, his voice echoing through the hollow halls. Almost instantly, lights flickered to life, casting a dim glow across the interior. The AI's voice came again, soft yet commanding. Follow me, Captain. As they walked deeper into the heart of the warship, the significance of their journey began to hit Rivers in full force. This wasn't just a ship. It was a symbol of humanity's forgotten power, a tool designed for war, built for conquest. Yet, as he walked through its darkened halls, he felt a sense of unease. What had driven humanity to abandon such a ship? Why had they left it here, on the edge of known space, for so long? They reached the central command deck, and Rivers couldn't help but gasp. The bridge was vast, filled with advanced technology that seemed centuries ahead of what the Star Alliance possessed. Holographic displays flickered to life, and in the center of it all, a massive chair, designed for a human form, sat beneath a canopy of shimmering light. The warship awaits its commander, Aegis said. Rivers stepped forward, feeling the weight of the moment. The chair was designed for him, for someone like him, someone who could command this ancient power. But the question remained, was he ready for the responsibility that came with it? And more importantly, did humanity deserve to wield such power again? Captain Rivers took a deep breath, his fingers brushing the edge of the chair before him. The weight of his ancestors' legacy seemed to pulse through the very air around him. The Valorous was not just a ship, it was a symbol, a weapon of unimaginable power, and a command center for humanity's return. The ship's AI, Aegis, seemed to sense his hesitation. Captain, Aegis's voice echoed in the chamber, calm and unwavering. You are the rightful heir. Humanity's time has come again. The galaxy waits. Rivers stared at the empty command chair for a long moment, as if the ship itself was daring him to take control, to step into the role that destiny had designed for him. He glanced back at Dr. Marks and Zoreth, both of them standing at the entrance to the bridge, their expressions a mix of awe and trepidation. They could see what this ship could do, the devastation it could unleash, but they also understood the consequences of using it. Dr. Marks spoke first, his voice tinged with unease. This is more than just a ship, Jackson. This is humanity's chance to regain what was lost, everything we've forgotten. But you need to understand, once we take the helm, there's no going back. The galaxy will never be the same. Zorath, who had been quietly observing, nodded in agreement. You've unlocked something that many species, including my own, feared would never resurface. The Valorous. It's a weapon, but it's also a message. A call for humanity to come out of the shadows. It's up to you now, Captain. What will you do with it? River's mind raced, torn between the temptation of using the ship's devastating power and the looming consequences of reawakening humanity's imperial past. The galaxy had changed. The Star Alliance, which once dominated, now contained factions with their own interests, their own ambitions. He had no illusions about the challenges humanity would face. After a moment, Rivers turned to the controls, settling into the chair. He felt a surge of energy course through the ship as Aegis responded to his presence, the ship's systems recognizing him as the leader it had waited for. Lights flared, screens illuminated, and the warship came alive, its immense power suddenly at Rivers' fingertips. "We're not here to conquer, but to reclaim," Rivers said, his voice low but resolute. "Humanity will not be a footnote in galactic history. We will rise, not as conquerors, but as equals." Aegis charted a course to the nearest human colony. A brief silence hung in the air as Aegis processed the command. Coordinates set. Destination, human colony, Sector 47X. The warship's engines rumbled to life, sending a wave of power through the deck as the ship prepared to depart. Dr. Marks and Zorath exchanged looks, both unsure of the path ahead, but equally aware that the galaxy was on the precipice of something monumental. Rivers had made his decision. Humanity's return was inevitable, and the galaxy would have to come to terms with it. The journey to the human colony took mere hours, the warship's advanced propulsion systems making short work of the vast distance. As they neared the colony, Rivers could see the scattered remnants of a once thriving human world, small settlements, and forgotten ruins. This was a place that had been abandoned long ago, left to the whims of time and the galaxy's shifting tides. "We're not the only ones who remembered," Zorath muttered, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the surrounding systems. "I'm detecting multiple ships near the colony, other factions, not part of the Star Alliance. They've made this place their home." Rivers' jaw tightened. He had expected resistance, but not this early. The galaxy was not going to roll over at the return of humanity. He glanced at Dr. Marks, who nodded grimly. "We'll make contact, but we won't give up our claim." With a decisive motion, Rivers activated the comms. "This is Captain Jackson Rivers of the human ship Valorous. We are reclaiming this colony in the name of humanity. Stand down or be prepared to face the consequences." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a voice crackled through the comms, a cold, hostile tone. "You have no right to claim this place, human. We've lived here for generations. If you want it, you'll have to fight for it." Rivers' fingers curled into fists, but his resolve hardened. "Then prepare yourselves," he said, turning to Aegis. "Activate weapon systems. Let them feel what happens when they challenge humanity's return." The Valorous's massive cannons came to life, their energy pulses lighting up the darkened space. Humanity's legacy had been reborn, and now it would reshape the galaxy. The Valorous's weapons hummed to life, the ship's immense energy systems activating with a deep, resonant thrum. Captain Rivers' eyes locked onto the view screen, where the hostile fleet loomed just outside the human colony's orbit. They were a ragtag collection of ships, scrap-built, heavily armed, and clearly prepared for a fight. The colony's self-appointed defenders, pirates, and mercenaries who had taken control in the absence of humanity's rule. But they were no match for the Valorous. "Prepare to fire," Rivers ordered, his voice steady, though a storm of thoughts churned inside him. This wasn't the kind of conflict he wanted, but the galaxy was making it clear that humanity's return would not be welcomed with open arms. "Aye, Captain," Zorath responded, his hands flying across the controls. The bridge trembled slightly as the ship's massive cannons powered up, their energy beams locking onto the enemy fleet. Dr. Marks, standing by Rivers' side, watched the scene unfold with a mix of dread and awe. "This isn't the path we should take, Jackson," he warned. We're showing them our strength, but the galaxy won't forget how we rise to power. If we strike first, we'll be seen as tyrants." Rivers clenched his jaw. He understood the stakes. Humanity had been gone too long. The galaxy had moved on, evolved, and forged alliances of its own. Now, humanity was challenging the status quo, and that would breed hostility. But there was no turning back. Not now. "Sometimes diplomacy is built on strength," Rivers said, his voice cold. "They'll understand why we've come." The enemy ships, seeing the Valoris's firepower come online, hesitated, perhaps unsure if they were truly ready to face the might of an ancient warship. But before they could make any move, Rivers gave the command. Fire. The ship's energy cannons unleashed a blistering barrage, sweeping through the enemy fleet like a storm cutting through dry grass. The first enemy ship was obliterated in a flash of light, reduced to debris and ash before the shockwave could even reach the Valoris. The rest of the fleet scattered, trying to evade the incoming fire, but they were hopelessly outmatched. The Valoris was a precision instrument of destruction, its weapons hitting with unerring accuracy. But despite the overwhelming power at his disposal, Rivers hesitated. He knew this kind of display would send a message that might save lives now, but could lead to endless conflict later. The galaxy had seen this kind of power before, and it had once resulted in the downfall of empires. A voice crackled over the comms, one of the enemy commanders, desperate but defiant. "You have no right, human. We've fought for this land. We won't bow to your imperial rule." Rivers' gaze hardened. "You will," he said, his voice calm, yet heavy with authority. "This is your last warning. Stand down and accept the new order, or face the full might of humanity's legacy." There was a brief silence. Then, slowly, the enemy commander's voice returned, this time tinged with fear. "We surrender. We will not fight anymore. But know this, there are others. We will not be the only ones to challenge you." Rivers' finger hovered over the communication controls for a moment. Then he gave the order. "Cease fire. Send a message to the galaxy. Humanity has returned, and we will not be ignored." The Valoris powered down its weapons. The devastation halted just as quickly as it had begun. Rivers looked at his crew, his team, all of them silently acknowledging the moment. This was their victory, but it was only the beginning. As the colony's defenders fell back, the Valoris's hull groaned under the weight of its newfound responsibility. It was not just a warship now. It was a banner for humanity's resurgence. And with that banner, Rivers knew, came great risks. "We've taken our first step," Rivers said, his voice quiet but resolute. "But this isn't over. This galaxy doesn't know what's coming. We need to prepare for diplomacy, for war, for everything." Dr. Marks nodded solemnly. "Humanity can't rule through fear alone, Jackson. We need allies. But this could be the start of something bigger. We've reawakened an empire, but we must build a future where we're not feared but respected." Rivers nodded, the weight of the future pressing on his shoulders. "We'll do both. We'll show the galaxy what humanity is capable of, and we'll show them that we're not here to destroy. We're here to rebuild and to lead." Zorth turned to him, his expression thoughtful. "A leader must always remember the cost of power, never forget who we were, and never forget what we can become." With that, the Valoris began its journey toward the next chapter of humanity's reawakening. The galaxy, once dominated by the unknown, was now on the brink of a new order, one where humanity would reclaim its place among the stars. The Valoris drifted silently in the void, its hull gleaming with an eerie, otherworldly glow. Captain Rivers stood on the bridge, staring out at the galaxy beyond. The warship had brought humanity's legacy back to life, but the galaxy's response was still uncertain. The tension in the air was palpable. The first battle had been won, but there were still countless questions hanging over them. Dr. Marks was at his side, examining a holographic map of the galaxy. "We've secured the colony, but the wider galaxy won't be so easily convinced to accept humanity's return," he said quietly. "We've made enemies today, Jackson. You can feel it in the air. There are factions watching us, waiting to see if we will rise as conquerors or diplomats. Rivers nodded, his expression grim. I know, the Valorous is powerful, but power alone won't sustain us. We can't rule by fear, not if we want to build something lasting. We need to show the galaxy we're not just a warlike species, but one that can lead, that can build alliances. Zorath, standing by a terminal, looked up from his work. I agreed, he said, his voice thoughtful. Power is a tool, not a solution. But I also know this. We can't be weak. There are forces out there that will never respect us unless we show them that we have the strength to defend our claim. Captain Rivers turned to them, his eyes narrowing. I don't intend to rule through terror, but we can't be naive either. The galaxy is a complex web of alliances, and it's not going to welcome humanity's return with open arms. Zorath gave a small shrug. Then let's make our own allies, he said. We're not the only ones who've been left in the shadows. The galaxy is full of forgotten civilizations, outcasts, and rebels. They could be just the kind of people who would understand our cause. Dr. Marks raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting we form alliances with these outcasts and rebels. That's risky, Jackson. Rivers' gaze hardened. It's riskier to remain alone. We need to rebuild humanity's place in the galaxy, but that won't happen by sitting in the shadows. If we have to make difficult decisions to secure our future, then so be it. The decision was made. Rivers turned to Aegis. Set a course for the Draker system. There's a rogue faction there, separate from the Alliance, but with a reputation for having the kind of warriors we could use. Acknowledged, Captain, Aegis responded. Course plotted. As the Valorous shifted into hyperspace, Rivers gathered his senior crew for a final briefing. They were going into uncharted territory. Territory that was dangerous, but necessary. He could feel the weight of what they were about to do. We're about to meet the Draker. They fought for survival on the fringes of the galaxy, outside the reach of the Star Alliance. If we want humanity to thrive again, we need their support. But this won't be easy. They don't trust anyone, and their loyalty is hard-won. Our strength may intimidate them, but we'll need to show them more than just power. We need to prove we can be their allies, not their rulers. Zorath leaned forward. And if they refuse, or worse, if they try to attack us? Rivers' expression didn't change. Then we defend ourselves. But if we can forge this alliance, we'll be one step closer to uniting the galaxy. We won't be an empire. We'll be the foundation of a new order. The Valorous emerged from hyperspace, the Draker system sprawling before them. It was a place of desolation, where warships and makeshift stations floated in the dark. The Draker had lived in the margins for centuries, a forgotten people with a fierce reputation. On the comms, a voice came through, low and gravelly. This is Draker Command. You've entered our space without permission. State your business. Rivers stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. I am Captain Jackson Rivers of the Valorous. We come to offer an alliance, not war. Humanity is returning to the stars, and we need allies. Your people could help us build a new future. There was a long silence before the voice returned, its tone unrateable. An alliance, you say? You've got courage, human, but you'll need more than that to earn our trust. Rivers' lips curled into a faint smile. Then let's prove it. The fate of humanity's future was on the line, and the first step toward unity had begun. The silence in the comms room was suffocating as Captain Rivers waited for a response. The voice from Draker Command had been skeptical, but there was a hint of curiosity behind the harsh tone. For a moment, Rivers felt the weight of the decision he had just made. This was no mere diplomatic envoy. This was an invitation to risk everything. Zorath stood by his side, his eyes narrowing as he examined the data streams. They'd locked onto us. They're assessing our ship's weapon systems. They're wary, Captain, but not yet hostile. Rivers nodded but kept his eyes on the comm screen. Give them what they want. I'll speak with their leader. Acknowledged, Zorath replied, as he initiated the communication sequence. The screen flickered, and a figure appeared. A Draker, their humanoid form towering and imposing, with dark, armored plating that resembled jagged stone. Their eyes were a piercing, unnatural yellow, a sign of the harsh environment they had endured for generations. The Draker had learned to survive, to adapt, and to fight. Now, they were waiting to see if humanity could do the same. The Draker leader's voice was low, rough, and tinged with suspicion. Captain Rivers, you claimed humanity is returning to the stars. But why should we, people who have been forgotten, help you? Your kind abandoned this galaxy, leaving us to scavenge in its ruins. Rivers met the Draker's gaze, his voice unwavering. We left because we were forced to, but we've learned from our mistakes. We are not here to rule or conquer. We're here to rebuild, to form alliances. Humanity's return is not a declaration of war. It's a declaration of unity. We want to stand beside you, not above you. Together, we can reshape the future. The Draker's eyes glinted with a mix of doubt and intrigue. Unity? Your people have always been conquerors. What makes you think we'll trust you? Rivers leaned forward, his voice calm but intense. Because we need you. And you need us. We've seen what the galaxy has become, divided, fractured. The Star Alliance isn't what it used to be. There are factions with their own agendas, but none of them are willing to help those left in the margins. We're not asking for your loyalty. We're asking for a chance to stand together, to defend what's ours. The Draker leader studied him for a long moment. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of past betrayals and the uncertainty of the future. Finally, the leader spoke, his voice even colder than before. You asked for a chance, but a chance is not given freely, human. You will prove your worth to us. We have our own ways of determining if an ally is worthy. If you want our support, you will survive the trial of steel. Rivers' brow furrowed. What is the trial of steel? The Draker leader's smile was almost predatory. It is a test of strength and resolve. A challenge to prove that you are capable of surviving in the depths of our system. If you fail, you will be left to rot. If you succeed, we will consider your offer. Rivers' pulse quickened, but his expression remained firm. We accept. We will face your trial. The leader nodded once, a gesture of approval or perhaps amusement. Very well, Captain Rivers. Prepare yourselves. We will bring you to the arena. With that, the screen went dark. Rivers turned to Dr. Marks and Zorith, both of them waiting for his decision. I don't like it, Dr. Marks said, his voice tense. This could be a trap, Jackson. The Draker are unpredictable. We don't know what kind of trial they'll put us through. Rivers looked at his crew, the weight of his responsibility bearing down on him. I know, but we don't have a choice. If we back down now, we lose their trust before we even begin. We need them. And we need to show them that humanity can survive, no matter the odds. Zorith nodded, his face set. Then we'll face the trial together, Captain. Whatever it takes. The Valorous shifted into position, moving toward a colossal Draker fortress that loomed on the edge of the system. It was a place of harsh, barren landscapes where only the strongest could endure. The trial of steel would be their proving ground, a place where weakness had no place. As they approached the fortress, Rivers couldn't help but wonder, would humanity rise to the challenge, or would this be their final test? The Draker would see if they were worthy, and if they weren't, the consequences would be dire. The future of humanity's place in the galaxy would be decided here, in the heart of Draker space, where only strength could carve a path to survival. The Valorous came to a halt just outside the Draker fortress, its immense size dwarfing the station that loomed before them. The fortress itself was a jagged mass of blackened steel and volcanic rock, an unyielding monument to the Draker's harsh way of life. A series of sharp spires rose from its surface, and the air crackled with an ominous energy that seemed to emanate from the very walls. Rivers stood at the front of the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. His mind was focused not on the daunting fortress ahead, but on the trial that awaited them within. There was no turning back now. The Draker had made their challenge clear, and humanity would either prove its worth or be cast aside forever. Captain, we've received instructions, Zorith said, his voice steady but carrying a note of concern. They've opened the gates. We're to land in the central arena. Rivers nodded. Set course. We'll face whatever comes. Prepare the crew for anything. The Valorous descended toward the surface of the fortress, the massive hangar doors opening to reveal a vast, arena-like structure. It looked more like an ancient battlefield than a modern test facility, with towering walls surrounding an open expanse of cracked stone. In the center of the arena, hundreds of Draker soldiers stood, their armor gleaming in the harsh light, their eyes fixed on the incoming ship. Rivers' pulse quickened as the landing gear thudded into place. The Valorous had barely touched down when the doors to the hangar opened with a loud hiss, and a team of heavily armed Draker soldiers, clad in black and silver armor, filed in. They were an intimidating sight, their weapons massive and lethal-looking, their movements swift and precise. The Draker leader, his dark eyes gleaming with predatory anticipation, stepped forward from the ranks. "Captain Rivers," he said, his voice cold, "the trial of steel begins now. You and your crew will face our greatest challenge, survival in the Crucible." Rivers exchanged a glance with Dr. Marks and Zorath. The tension in the air was thick with unspoken fear, but none of them showed any sign of hesitation. The Draker were merciless, but they were also a people bound by their own code. If they were to be allies, humanity had to prove that it could survive their way of life, no matter the cost. A platform rose from the ground beneath them, revealing a massive chasm that stretched out before them. The air was thick with the scent of sulfur and the faint hum of energy fields. The Draker leader motioned toward the chasm. "The Crucible awaits. You will face our trials, environmental hazards, combat tests, and the wild beasts of this planet. You must survive and reach the other side to earn our respect." Rivers stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "We will pass your test." The Draker leader's lips curled into a grim smile. "We shall see, human." The ground beneath them shook as large mechanical doors opened, revealing the first stage of the trial, a treacherous labyrinth filled with firestorms and jagged rocks, swirling with toxic fumes. From the sound of the rumbling beneath their feet, the environment itself was unstable, shifting constantly, as if it were alive and watching. "This is just the beginning," the Draker leader warned as the heavy doors slammed shut behind them, sealing the Valorous crew inside. "Only those who prove their strength will make it through." Dr. Marks took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the ominous landscape. "We need to stay focused. The environment is going to be our first challenge." Zorath turned to Rivers, his expression steely. "We faced worse. The Draker may test us physically, but we have the advantage of adaptability. We'll make it through this." Rivers nodded. "Stay sharp. We stick together, adapt, and survive." The first step into the Crucible was an immediate test of resilience. The ground beneath them cracked as intense heat radiated from below, and geysers of scalding steam shot upward. Rivers instinctively raised his arm to shield his face from the blast of hot air, then motioned for the crew to move quickly. The trial was designed to break them, to see if humanity had the endurance to survive in a hostile, unforgiving environment. But as they advanced through the twisting maze, facing firestorms, sudden rockfalls, and toxic fumes, it became clear that the Draker underestimated them. They had survived the hardships of exile, the brutal struggles that came with being forgotten by the galaxy. Now, as the Valorous crew navigated the first stage of the Crucible, they discovered something deep within themselves, the unbreakable will of humanity. The Draker watched from their perch above, and for the first time, a glimmer of respect seemed to flicker in the leader's eyes. "You are more than we expected," he muttered under his breath. But Rivers wasn't focused on the Draker's approval. His team had one goal: survive. And as they faced the heart of the Crucible, he knew the stakes were higher than ever. The harsh winds of the Crucible howled as Captain Rivers and his crew pressed forward. The landscape around them was a nightmare: craggy terrain, molten fissures crisscrossing the ground, and towering rock formations that seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. Every step was a challenge, each move calculated to avoid sudden geysers of scalding steam or the eruption of flames from hidden vents in the earth. "Watch your footing," Zorath called out, his voice barely audible over the storm of ash and wind. The ground shifts with every step. One wrong move, and we'll be swallowed up by the lava. Rivers nodded, his eyes focused on the path ahead. They had made it this far, through the firestorms and the rock slides. But the worst was still ahead. The next stage of the crucible was where the Draker truly tested those who sought their favor. Combat with the wild beasts of the planet. These creatures were notorious for their strength, speed, and aggression, and if the crew couldn't defeat them, they wouldn't survive. As they moved through the desolate landscape, the earth trembled beneath their feet. The ground cracked open in a thunderous roar, and from the darkened sky, a massive shadow descended. Rivers had no time to react. The creature was already on them. It was a towering behemoth, its scales as hard as iron and its eyes glowing with primal fury. The beast was at least 15 feet tall, its body armored in obsidian-like plating, and it let out a guttural roar that sent shockwaves through the air. Its jaws, filled with rows of jagged teeth, snapped toward them with terrifying speed. "Scatter!" Rivers shouted as he drew his sidearm. His team immediately split up, each of them taking cover behind the jagged rocks scattered across the arena. The beast lunged at them, its movements as swift as lightning despite its immense size. Zorth fired first, his energy rifle crackling as bolts of plasma bounced off the creature's armored hide. It snarled in rage, but barely flinched. "We need to hit it where it's weak," Dr. Marks shouted, his voice filled with urgency. "Aim for its joints, the softer spots." Rivers didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted to the left, using the terrain to his advantage, and found a narrow ledge that gave him an elevated position. The creature was focused on Zorth, who had drawn its attention with a series of well-placed shots. Rivers waited for the right moment. Then when the beast reared back to strike, he aimed for its underbelly, where the scales were thinner. His shot rang out, striking true, and the creature howled in pain. It staggered, momentarily disoriented. "Now," Rivers barked, signaling for the others to attack. Zorth, seeing the opening, moved in with a flash of speed, launching himself at the beast's flank and planting a well-aimed energy grenade at its side. The explosion was deafening, sending the creature tumbling backward, its screech of pain echoing through the arena. But the battle wasn't over. The creature roared again, its eyes glowing with a fierce, burning hatred. It was far from defeated. With a monstrous bellow, it charged forward once more, faster than before. "We've pissed it off now." Zorth grunted, barely dodging the beast's snapping jaws. Rivers grabbed Dr. Marks by the shoulder, pulling him to safety as another blast of flame shot from the creature's maw, scorching the rocks around them. "Keep it together. We're not out of this yet." The team regrouped, their formation tight. With Zorth providing cover, Rivers fired once more, this time aiming at the base of the creature's throat, where the scales were weakest. His shot was precise, and the creature howled in agony, its enormous body writhing in pain. It was clear now, the beast was faltering. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were proving that humanity could outsmart even the most formidable adversaries. Finally, with one last concerted effort, Dr. Marks threw a makeshift explosive at the creature's flank. The blast sent it reeling, and with a final guttural roar, it collapsed, twitching as its massive form hit the ground with a deafening thud. For a moment, silence fell over the arena. The air was thick with the smell of sulfur and burnt flesh, and Rivers' crew stood, panting and bruised, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat. But they had done it. They had survived. The Draker leader's voice crackled through the comms. Impressive. Few survived the trial of fire, let alone defeat the Moriaks. Rivers wiped his brow, his voice steady but weary. "We're not done yet." The Draker leader's tone was colder than before. "Indeed, you've passed the first test, but the crucible is not over. There are more trials ahead, and the final one will determine if you are truly worthy of an alliance with the Draker." Rivers turned to his crew, his gaze resolute. "We didn't come this far to back down. We'll face whatever comes next. Together." As the Draker began to lower the walls of the arena, allowing the crew to catch their breath, Rivers knew that their trials were far from over. But with each victory, They grew stronger, more united. And in this unforgiving galaxy, that was exactly what humanity needed: unity, strength, and the unyielding will to survive.